Hello, everyone. My name is Laurie Smith, and I'm just doing 30 days broadcasting because April is the National Child Abuse Prevention and Awareness Month in the States. And so I'm just adding my voice in there with everybody else's. It's the topics of child abuse are horrible. Tonight we're talking about domestic violence, and it's not a fun topic. It's not fun to listen to. Um, if you think the topics of abuse or child abuse or domestic violence or anything like that might bother you, then feel free to just go watch something else. You wouldn't be hurting my feelings at all. And I have a lot of people who follow my work who work with children and families, and also people who are try to help survivors of abuse, and also lots of friends who have either witnessed abuse or have been abused themselves as children or in a domestic violence situation. So um, you know, that's what this show is about. So it's not really a show. It's just me talking. But I brought it. I wanted to bring up some info that I found was really good and relevant, and I did put the links into the show page, so you can read those yourself. It's really quite interesting. Um, it's sad, children witnessing domestic violence in their own homes, and I'm a secondhand survivor of domestic violence. So I grew up abused in a home full of domestic violence and abuse, family violence, and it really definitely took its toll on me. I know so many people who grew up in homes that where there was domestic violence and abuse, and it has a terrible effect on children and on families, of course. And if anybody's struggling listening to me right now, make sure you reach out and get some help. Get a safety plan. If your life is being threatened or your life is in danger, you know, get a safety plan. Learn how to keep yourself safe and how to keep your children safe, and get out, you know, and save your life and save your children's life if you have children. It's so important. Like we see the headlines rolling in all the time. Um, you know, someone killed in a domestic violence dispute. And this goes on night after night in every city, in every town, day after day. Um, every little hamlet, it doesn't matter. Um, I guess no place on the earth is actually um, sort of unscathed by this sort of thing. This is actually sad but true. And so, domestic violence shelters here in Calgary are full 365 days a year. So that tells you just how much this stuff is actually going on. And growing up in this, and knowing that my friends were also experiencing a lot of this sort of the same similar things, or even worse, it was no shock to me to realize that so many people are dealing with this. And then so many people that I knew that grew up in these situations then went on to have their own adult lives dealing with their own domestic violence and issues like that. So it's really horrible. And it's a sad, sad situation for everybody, but especially for the children. So we're going to look tonight first at nspcc.org.uk. That's a great website. I actually just stumbled across it. And, there's tons of info on that website. Um, we're looking at what is child abuse. So we're looking at domestic violence as, as how it affects children, and that it is actually abuse. It says witnessing domestic abuse is child abuse. And if you're worried about a child, we have advice to help you keep them safe. This is a great website. So you can get that link and you can check this out, right? What is domestic abuse? So first we're going to cover this one, then we're going to look at impact of domestic violence, children exposed to domestic violence from the Center for Domestic Peace.org. And those are the two articles that I found that were very, very useful and, right to the point of what a child goes through. And I'm sure I'll add some stuff in there of what I experienced. And, I wrote about it in my books, Life of Death and Redemption, La Vida Juvies, and mainly those two books are about that. And it was very graphic and detailed about the issues between my parents. I wanted people to know firsthand, like, what it is to grow up abused, and not just from some scholarly article that was written by professionals. I wanted people to hear from a survivor, a secondhand survivor of domestic violence. So, a child growing up in that, right? It was absolutely a nightmare. And so we'll just read what they have to say here. What is domestic abuse? Domestic abuse is any type of controlling, bullying, threatening, or violent behavior between people in a relationship. It can seriously harm children and young people, and witnessing domestic abuse is child abuse. It's important to remember domestic abuse can happen inside and outside the home, can happen over the phone, on the internet, or on social networking sites, can happen in any relationship and can continue even after the relationship is ended. Both men and women can be abused or abusers. So it's not just the men or just the women. I mean, anybody can be an abuser. Right? Types of domestic abuse. Domestic abuse, they're calling it domestic abuse. This is in the UK, right? We call it domestic violence over here, but it's the same thing. Types of domestic abuse can be emotional, physical, sexual, financial, or psychological, such as, kicking, hitting, punching, cutting, rape, including in a relationship, control, like marital rape, which was my parents' issue, controlling someone's finances by withholding money or stopping someone earning, controlling behavior, like telling someone where they can go and what they can wear, um, not letting someone leave the house, just controlling everything about this person, whoever it is, the other partner, reading emails, text messages, or letters, threatening to kill someone or harm them, threatening to another family member or pet. Those types of things for children to grow up around that, even if the child is not being abused, um, it's going to affect them. It's hard to witness stuff like that, especially between parents or caregivers that the child um, cares about and loves, and possibly they might, and at the very least, that they would probably fear for their own lives too. Just being around violence like that, being around abuse between two other adults in the family or more. Um, you know, Children then become fearful of what's going to happen when I'm at school, you know, what's going to happen to mom or dad, whoever's being abused, am I going to get hurt? It's an absolute horrible situation for children to grow up in or to even be part of at any point in their life. And, um, it's horrible. So signs of domestic abuse. It can be difficult to tell if domestic abuse is happening, and those carrying out the abuse can act very different when other people are around. That's why I wrote my books, because I wanted people to know the truth about my parents. Children and young people might also feel frightened and confused, keeping the abuse to themselves. So, signs that a child has witnessed domestic abuse can include aggression or bullying, antisocial behavior, vandalism, anxiety, depression, or suicidal thoughts, attention seeking. They can have nightmares, bedwetting, insomnia, constant or regular sickness like colds, headaches, mouth ulcers, drug or alcohol abuse, eating disorders, problems in school or trouble learning, tantrums and withdrawal. So not just having those signs just by themselves doesn't prove that a child's growing up in a domestic violence situation. But if a child is has none of those or very few of those signs, of behavioral signs, in let's say a teacher just notices all of a sudden that there's real changes in that child, and all of a sudden they are acting out, or they're becoming withdrawn, or they're fearful, or they may be becoming aggressive all of a sudden. Those kind of changes you want to keep an eye out for. If a child's just not normally like that, um, then it could be something going on at home, right? So it's a good idea to keep an eye on that. And effects of domestic abuse. This is on this website. We'll go over to this impact of domestic violence. Children exposed to domestic violence. This is from centerfordomesticpeace.org. And this is another article that I thought was pretty helpful. Children in abusive homes can experience the effects of abuse in multiple ways. They may be exposed indirectly to the abuser's violent and coercive behaviors toward their parent by witnessing or overhearing the abuse, or by noticing bruises and injuries after an act of violence occurs. They themselves may experience verbal, physical, emotional, and/or sexual abuse. So, they're saying whether directly or indirectly exposed, children who are exposed to domestic violence experience the painful effects of abuse. And a lot of people think, and I've heard this and seen this in articles and stuff like that, that parents or caregivers in a situation where there was domestic violence going on didn't think that it was going to affect the children because it never occurred around the child, so the child didn't actually witness any of it, but the child heard it. So the child was maybe in their bedroom, maybe in the middle of the night this was going on. um, so they didn't think that that was going to affect their child, but it does, because you know children then see the aftermath and the even if they aren't witnessing the actual abuse, they're going to notice the tension in the air between these two uh, parents or caregivers, whoever's looking after this child. So it's very evident to the child. Children aren't stupid. You know what I mean? Sometimes they act like they can't hear you and that they don't see what's going on, but they do, and they're not dumb. So if it's right in their face, then obviously they're going to know what's going on. If it's done sort of secretly between the two caregivers or parents, the child is still have an idea that something's wrong. Maybe bruises, broken furniture, broken bones. It's like, you know, hospital visits for one of the, his parents. You know, I mean, women do abuse too, so I'm not just picking on the men here. Um, there's this big, idea there's always only just men that abuse, but I mean, women are abusers too. So it can be anybody, right? Um, and it's just a sad way to grow up. I mean, really horrible, horrible, horrible. My parents were like, I wrote about this. It's actually, I mean, I really spelled it out on my blog. It's also on my books. And it's not like my parents just set out and said, "Hey, we'll just destroy each other and we'll just destroy our children and we'll just get right at it." I don't think that was their. That wasn't the way they started out. That wasn't the goal. They were both coming from abusive homes, and a lot of psychological abuse, physical abuse, and then got together. And the two of them hadn't worked out any of their issues, and so um, my dad just thought it was okay to abuse my mom. He just thought that's what you do. This was back in like the 40s, the 1940s in Canada. And my mom actually, after a few years of putting up with this, actually wanted to divorce him, and because she said he was beating on the children, my first siblings that were born, and of course she was beating on them too, obviously. But the thing is the court said no, you can't divorce him because this isn't was in Canada in 1945 or whatever. They said no, you can't divorce him because there's no infidelity. Right? My dad wasn't sleeping around with my mom, so she couldn't divorce him. So she was stuck with him uh, in Canada, right? So they moved to the States, and I think that my dad was in the DOT, Department of Transport, World War II, which is really part of the military up here in Canada. He was part of the oh, radar and all of that stuff for the Atlantic forces going back and forth to Europe. And so they moved around quite a bit. And, you know, they'd move to a new place, uh, settle in, and then the abuse would start up. My mom said it was just this continual thing. Like, I think my dad was just trying to always start fresh and okay, we'll make a new start at this base. We'll make a new start in this town or this place. And I was probably hopeful that it would work out, but it never did. And because the two of them had never worked out their issues, they both were coming from abusive homes. So um, my dad, the main problem between them was that my mom was very sick, and she had too many children, and the doctors told her not to have any more children, especially after my brother was born. And he was born in Montreal, I think. And they said, no more children, you're going to die. You know what I mean? And my dad just kept forcing himself on her, marital rape, right? So there were three more children born after my brother that didn't make it in between me and my sister. Well, actually, two in between me and my sister, and then one more. So there would have been 10 of us, but seven of us made it. He just kept forcing himself on my mother. My mother was very sick. This just caused a lot of problems in their relationship. They already were not getting along. He was already abusing her physically, and then to rape her, and she was a bigger woman, so it's not like she was a mousy woman hiding in the corner. It's just that he was bigger than her, and he was stronger than her. So she did try to hold him off, and she was pretty good at it sometimes. But the thing is you shouldn't have to try to protect yourself from your husband raping you. That's just not something you should have to do. But she did. She had to try to keep him away from her because he was always continually trying to rape her. And I made a big point of this on my videos that I did here on YouTube because I wanted people to know that my dad was continually trying to rape her. And he raped her in front of me one time when I was 6 years old. I remember. And he didn't know I was in the room. And my mom was telling him that I was in the room, but he didn't pay any attention. He was just too busy raping my mother and slapping her around. It was just a great scene. So I heard what was going on because I, of course, was closed my eyes. I didn't want to see any of this, um, and I just laid very still because I didn't want my dad to beat me up, right? So, because my dad was abusing me too, right? So, no child should have to live and grow up in that. Um, and there are problems. I mean, they just kept that right on going through their whole marriage. They never got any help for it, even when they were busted and arrested on child abuse charges. The courts, of course, knew that there was domestic violence going on because my older siblings, had spilled the beans about all of it to them, and they were like, "Okay, people, you need marital counseling. You need, because my mom was, trying to narc my dad out by saying it was all him. Oh, he was abusing the children. He abuses me too." And the courts were like, let's get to the bottom of this. So they talked to all the children, the older children, and they all said, no, our mom's abusing us too. So they said, okay, all you both need counseling. Seriously, you need marital counseling. You need your own personal counseling. You need family counseling. Like you guys are messed up. When they were brought up on charges, they were both tested for uh, competency to see, whether they were capable of keeping their children, and they both were diagnosed mentally ill. My dad was diagnosed psychologically ill with borderline BPD, borderline personality disorder, and schizophrenia, borderline schizophrenia. He was very paranoid, and I mean, he thought that demons were after him all the time. He thought the devil was out to get him. He'd be screaming in the middle of the night. He was suicidal. He was just a mess, my dad. And my mom, on the other hand, was more stable than him, even though she was my main abuser. So I had to be really careful around her and watch my P's and Q's. But she was much more stable than my dad. So I actually preferred and would have, rather stayed with her if they would have split, of course, because I didn't trust my dad at all. And because I thought he might kill us. He was always talking about familicide, and we're going to do a show about that. But he's talking about killing the family, killing himself. This was a normal conversation that he would have around the house. In the middle of the night, waking us up, saying he was going to kill us, and he's going to kill my mom. He's going to kill all of us. It was just a horrible situation. And when I was really little, it used to scare me because I thought, for sure he's going to do it. When I got older, I was just like, he's just crazy. My mom, I just, she was a victim in this mess. But she didn't get any help. And, if she should have got out, she should have just got out. My older siblings actually told her, my brothers who were older, my oldest sister actually told her, you should just leave, you know, put all the kids in care and just leave. Go get your life, man. But she wouldn't listen and she stuck it out and made everybody's life just miserable. Both of my parents did. So they were both responsible. And, they both decided that's how they were going to handle their life. But to the neighbors, totally different story. The neighbors just loved them. The neighbors knew they had problems. The neighbors knew because the cops were always around. My mom was always in the hospital, and my mom was always covered with bruises and black eyes, and there was always busted furniture all over the place, broken windows. So the neighbors knew it wasn't too cool at our house. But they loved my parents. They absolutely loved them because my parents were very charming. I actually look a lot like my mom, and have a lot of her demeanor, except for I don't rage like she did. Um, and I'm not an abusive person like she was. But the thing is she could smile, she could have fun, she loved to have a good time. All the neighbors loved her. They loved to have her over for coffee and sit and chat. And she'd, of course, cry the blues, my husband, he's this and that, and my children, my rotten children. And I really went into detail on this in my videos that I did for my boarding health series and in my books. So I wanted people to know the manipulation that was going on. My mom tried to manipulate the courts, but it didn't work. And thankfully, I'm glad that it was recorded that she was busted too. And she manipulated the neighbors. Right? They all just felt so sorry for her, and the children were all beaten up. I always say beat to rat shit because that's basically it. But the children, nobody cared at all about us. It was all about my parents, right? And that's why I went so public with my stuff. I'm like, people need to know the truth about this sort of thing. This happens all the time because adults don't have relationships with children. They do. They have adults with the abusers, right? So whoever these abusers are, these parents, these caregivers, um, other adults have a relationship with them, so they're not thinking about the kids. Most likely, very rarely does anybody say, "What are you doing to your children, man?" You know what I mean? Like, we're gonna have to intervene here. You know what I mean? Because you can't be abusing your kids like that. The kids were just looked at. All of us, all my siblings and myself, were just looked at as these worthless, no good kind of, troublemaking kids that made life miserable for my mom. Because that's how she would spin it. Like, she would spin it to the neighbors that we were just so bad and we were always just causing her so much grief. When she was beating on me or cursing at me or, you know, throwing things at me, was always, you're causing me so much trouble. And she was always, that was her favorite thing to say to all of her children, actually. And, we knew we weren't causing her all that much trouble. And we all cared about her. We all tried to protect her. My brothers, my older siblings, my brothers would have to keep my dad away from her in the middle of the night because he was always trying to rape her. And, he'd beat her up, right? So he would attack her. It wasn't like, he would just try to rape her and then just leave her alone. He literally would attack her to rape her, right? So this was a nightly thing pretty much in our house. So my older brothers, who were just about as tall as my dad, not quite as muscular, would have to try to protect my mom from him. They'd get beaten up. I took on the role after they moved out because I'm like, well, somebody's got to try to stand up for mom. So, my mom, it's like she was doing the best she could, but she was also in pretty bad shape by the time after I was born. So, um, just no child should ever have to grow up like that. No child. No, it's not okay. And this is going on around the world, in every country, in every city, in every town, right? There's nowhere where this is not going. I mean, everywhere it's going on, right? And children are growing up in that, right? So even if they're not being abused, in our case, we were being abused, all of us. But even if the child's not being abused, they're witnessing horrible, horrible stuff that they should never have to see or be a part of. And it's just so important, to get children to safety, to get children to a safe environment, right? A caring, loving environment where there's safety. And like, it's just so horrific. So that's adding my little stuff in there. They themselves may experience verbal, physical, emotional, and or sexual abuse. Well, emotional, definitely emotional abuse, because that's even if the other physical stuff isn't there, they're being emotionally abused because they're growing up in that environment, right? It's just horrible. So um, even if they themselves are not directly being hurt, then this is from Center for Domestic Peace.org. Even if they themselves are not directly being hurt, they feel the pain and fear that comes from living with someone who is threatening and controlling. And since abuse and violence are learned behaviors, part of the impact on children can also involve them taking on the cultural beliefs that support domestic violence, domestic abuse. One study reveals that men who were exposed to physical violence, sexual abuse, and adult domestic violence as children were almost 4 times more likely than other men to perpetrate domestic violence as adults. So it's not always the case. There's many people who are abused or who grew up in abusive homes who, would never abuse their children. And that's just the truth. It's not always the case that someone who sees or witnesses violence would go on to perpetrate that, but it can happen, and it's just terrible. So they said, depending upon the age, children may respond to their experience of abuse in a variety of ways. All children and youth who live with domestic violence are affected by the experience. The nature and extent of the effects vary greatly. Some children are severely traumatized, while others are able to cope well and go on to live healthy, productive lives. Depends on the what's going on and how much of it is directed towards the child, and for how long, and how serious it was. You know what I mean? Um, some may experience confusion and damage to their ability to trust the people in their lives. They may worry about the future or feel anxiety over never knowing what's coming next. And that was my issue. I never knew what was going to be going on in our house. And, I just, you just deal with it. So, you just have to be there. But, it's always living kind of fight or flight, that cortisone, whatever that stuff is, you're always in a flight or fight or flight state. And that's really hard on the body. So they may side with an abusive partner in order to stay safe, recognizing where the power lies in the family. That's what I did. I sided with my mom because my mom was my main abuser. And I thought, well, if I get her on her good side against my dad, maybe she'll, treat me a little better. And it just didn't help at all. But I was trying anyway. Try to protect the abused parent. So I did that, even to the point of physically coming between the adults. I did that, and I got hurt a couple of times doing that. My brothers were always getting beat up for that. That's the main reason why they were getting abused, why they were abused by my dad. And I carried it on, and it happened to me. A couple of my siblings weren't involved in that, and they never, had to deal with that. But I just thought it was the right thing to do to protect my mom because, to try to help her because it is the right thing to do. And I thought, my dad should know it's incredibly wrong what he's doing. He didn't seem to care. He just hurt me. He threw me across the room into a wall, actually a couple of times. And, once when I was really little and then once when I was older. But, you know, it's just not okay, right? Have a difficult time focusing at school because they're worried about what's happening at home. That was me. I used to actually have sort of, oh, I don't know what you want to call it, but I guess a really just fear that one of my parents would be killed when I got home. So, I'd sit there in class and I'm supposed to be listening to the teacher or focusing on my work, and my mind would be just going over and over the fact that, I wonder if my mom's gonna be dead when I get home, right? I wonder if one of my brothers is gonna be dead when I get home. I wonder if my dad's gonna be dead when I get home. Maybe my mom will kill him, right? It's like it was a serious issue. Um, Horrible, horrible. They may have an impulse to get away because home feels like a dangerous place. That was me. I mean, I didn't want. I mean, where are you going to go? To, a more dangerous place on the street? You know. Thankfully, I had some friends that used to let me stay at their house once in a while. But just this impulse to get away, and I think that's why I keep running. You know, I'm always running. I'm running, always running. I run from jobs. I run to countries, other countries. I just run because I'm just trying to get away, right? And it's uh, it's a horrible thing, right? I'm learning how to stay put and how to deal with things. But I mean, when it's part of your psyche, if you grow up like that, you know, it's just part of who you are, right? So I'm having to catch all this stuff and see what it is and be like, oh, I'm doing it again. Okay, I need to stop. You know what I mean? Stop, think, let's, you know, see what's going on. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Um, Absolutely horrible. They may feel guilty or believe that the abuse is their fault. A lot of children will take that on, believe that their parents are fighting because of them. Some, if the parents actually tell them that it's their fault, well, then that might be why. But I think that a lot of times they just take that guilt on because they think, well, maybe it's me. You know, maybe mom and dad are in this, domestic violence stuff, fighting and hurting each other because of me. That's terrible, right? It's never the child's fault. Never ever. And they may experiment with alcohol, drugs, overeating, or self harm to numb their feelings. That was me. I still do it today. And, I'm learning now how to sort of deal with this stuff a little bit better. I gave up the drugs and stuff when I was 22, right around 22. And because I knew I was going to end up dead. I was like, I'm just going to be I'll either overdose or I'll be killed in some drug deal or something, or I'll just, it'll just kill my body, right? I've been doing some horrible drugs for a long time. I mean, before the age of 22. Most people started doing drugs about then, but I actually got off of them at that point. And I'm like, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I want to live a normal life. But it took me to the age of 42 to get help, right? Another 20 years, right? 20 years of suicidal ideation. Um, Nobody knew this. I'd go to work. I was fine. Have a good time, go out after work with friends, have a good time, hang out with my husband, have a good time. And then me, myself, and I by myself at night, in the middle of the night, in the dark, just thinking, you know, I need to end this, right? I'm never able to um, deal with what had been done to me and what I had witnessed and what I had been, these were people I cared about. This was my family, right? I watched them just be destroyed. And some of them destroyed themselves. And that was just horrible. I was doing the same thing. Um, I just witnessed so much destruction. And none of our lives were unscathed by this. Even my siblings that did well for themselves. Actually, there was a couple. There was two, and my sister Kathy. I mean, the one that's closest in age to me, 5 years difference. She's actually doing quite well for herself, even though she's a divorced, and her husband was abusing her. So, um, but she got out of that, and she's having a good life. But the thing is none of us came out of this unscathed. No, and because we grew up in this dysfunctional, abusive hellhole, um, could not ever relate with each other. I have no relationship with any of my siblings, none whatsoever, and especially the one who raped me, sodomized me, sexually abused me for a year. And so, I mean, I was just a little girl. Um, but even as an adult, my other siblings who were still alive, not much of any kind of real relationship, period. That does happen in families, and um, you know, the family members that were living when I wrote my books weren't really all that happy about the fact that I wrote those books. But I was like, there you go, you can read it. It's all there. It's all true. And you know, there it is. It's out there for the world to see. Because there's no way I should have had to carry that shame and that blame and that disdain for my life, oh, you know, hidden anymore. I'm like, no, the world's gonna find out what you guys did. You know what I mean? They're gonna find out what it caused me to do, and I want people to know the truth. You know, so I appreciate anybody who's taken the time to read my books and send me nice comments and stuff. It was very therapeutic for me to do that, and also just having all the proceeds go to stop and prevent child abuse really makes me happy. And so this is just such a horrible situation. I mean, children seeing their loved ones destroying each other. They you know it's most children love both parents. They don't want to see their parents fighting, or their mom getting hurt, or their dad getting hurt, or it's just one of their caregivers getting hurt. It's just not okay. And it says children who have experienced abuse need support. So a strong relationship with a caring, nonviolent parent is one of the most important factors in helping children grow in a positive way, despite their experiences. See, I didn't have that. So there was no caring, nonviolent parent in my home. So I had to get that from my friends. And some of my friends' parents were like that for me, and a couple of them actually. And I kind of learned a lot from them. I tried to pay attention. Sometimes when I was really young, 12, 13, 14, right in there, some of the stuff they would tell me just it didn't seem all that important. It's just kind of like, no, they're just talking, you know, don't hate myself, don't hate life, don't hate my parents, have love in your heart, um, you deserve better, wish you were my child, this kind of stuff, which made me feel really good, you know. But I didn't think much about it until the age of 42 when I remembered these words, these kind words from these people who bothered to care about a child that wasn't their own child, just a friend of their daughters, right? And I mean, they fed me, like they took good care of me. I was over at their house quite a bit, sometimes for 2 weeks, sometimes a week, sometimes a couple of days, whatever. And they'd wash my clothes and fed me. And they just included me in with the family when I was there. I really just felt like a family member. They just set a place for me at the table. That's not what was going on in my home. You know, in my home, I wasn't welcome to sit down at the table. None of us were. It wasn't just me. None of us were welcome in that home. We just showed up, went to bed and hoped that nobody heard you in the middle of the night or something. You know what I mean? It's kind of like I never got any good sleep, but you know, somebody was always hurting somebody in the middle of the night. So, we just kept showing up. I don't know. You know what I mean? It's like, oh well, at least we know what we're getting here. If I go on the streets, then I have a better chance of getting raped by somebody that I don't know. I was just raped by my brother when I was 8 years old. But you know, I knew the streets weren't safe, and I knew kids that were in a lot of trouble on the streets, and I was like, no, I'm not going to the streets, and I'm also not going to foster care to deal with some other possible abuser. This way, I know who my abusers are, and I can kind of keep tags on them. You know what I mean? Keep tabs. Absolutely horrific. You know, and no child should ever have to go through that. And it's just like not okay, right? So yeah, if there's one parent or somebody, a grandparent or some aunt or uncle or somebody, in that child's life who understands that there's abuse going on in the home where the child is, and then, kind of comes around to support that child, that can help because they can help them to feel safe, a little bit safe, you know what I mean? That there's somebody that they know that's trustworthy, that one person. It's kind of like me with my friend's parents. Even though I didn't really trust anybody, I didn't trust adults for sure. But I did really like those people because they were nice to me. And, they never did anything to me that was hurtful and I thought, well, I can at least trust these guys. You know what I mean? They're not going to hurt me. So that's when I was older too. When I was really young, I didn't trust any adults. I didn't trust my teachers. I didn't trust anybody because all the adults to me were abusers. And so, it's pretty sad but true. It says non-offending parents can help their children by being honest with them, tell them that the abuse is not their fault. As parents seek support for themselves, they can also explore resources that will specifically support the children. And involving other caring adults can sometimes be helpful, and whether they are living with the abuser or have left. And it's a scary situation for people who are still living with the abuser. It just depends on, how severe the abuse is and whether the abuser is threatening that person's life or their children's life. A lot of times that's it. And there's going to be no help for those people. There's going to be there's no way they can tell somebody, hey, I'm being abused, you know what I mean? Because if anybody finds out and then anybody tries to do anything, the abuser might kill them, right? So that's the problem with domestic violence, you know? So many, women and even men, um, are abused and lose their lives to the abuser because they try to get away, right? They try to make a safety plan. They maybe they talk to their friends, whoever their friends were, and then um, somehow the abuser finds out and then kills them because it's all about control. It's absolutely about control. I've done lots of looking into this stuff. I mean, I did years and years worth of material. If you ever want to go back and check it out, it's here on my YouTube channel, and you can go through and pick out all the child abuse awareness stuff. That's child abuse prevention is up to us. And then there's another one, one child abuse survivor to another, and all the different like the journey and all these different restoration ones that I was doing because I'd come back and do some more. All of those stuff I'm talking about, all this stuff, and there's some heavy duty stuff. You know, I mean, it's insane what's going on out there, and the abuse is really about control, and the abuser, whoever this person is, who is trying to control the other person, whether it's their intimate partner, whether it's um, their children, whatever, they'll use whatever means they need to control the situation. So if it's verbal and that works, that's generally what they tend to do. If verbal doesn't work, then they try physical. You know what I mean? And whatever, has a lot to do with control. And the abuser wants the upper hand, so they make sure that they get the upper hand, by hurting the other person and putting fear into them. Because I know that's a serious issue. When somebody beats you and maybe you pass out, they knock you out, or they put you in the hospital, that fear is going to be there, right? And then you're not going to want to do anything because you don't want to get beaten like that again. So you're just going to be like, you're just going to go along with it, right? That's what happens to so many children because you know they fear being accosted like that again, raped, sexually abused, you name it. Abuse is horrible. It's horrifying. That's why nobody wants to deal with it. I talk about it because that's how I grew up. I grew up, every single day that I grew up, there was some type of abuse going on in my home. So it wasn't like, the abuse happened for a couple of years and then, everything was great. Or maybe the abuse happened for 6 months and then everything was great. I mean, this just went on and on and on and on. And it's like, I was just willing to speak about it. You know, my other siblings just wanted to put it behind them. They didn't want to talk about it. And I'm like, no, we're talking about it because, you know, I'm a prime example of what it is to grow up in a horrible situation and then try to have to learn how to live to be an adult in this world with I don't have the information. I don't have the information that I need. And most people have grandparents or you know one of their parents anyway who cares about them and helps them to do things in life. And, I've never had any information. I just have to get it myself. And it's like, I'm missing some stuff, right? I'm missing some valuable knowledge, on how to get through life, right? And so, I'm doing this live because I know so many survivors out there are struggling, and so many of them take that abuse on, and blame themselves. And it was never your fault, and it was never my fault. Um, we were just forced to live it, and then we have to pick up the pieces, right? So I did my healing journey all publicly so that people could see the progress being made and what I was talking about and the things that I would discover about how I felt, which I think would be really relevant to how other people are feeling. If they grew up abused or experienced horrific abuse, that or any type of abuse, all abuse is horrific. So that's what I'm saying. All abuse is horrific. I don't care what kind you're talking about, what kind I'm talking about. It's all incredibly horrific and deadly. Because if it doesn't kill the child, quite often they will go out and live a life where they're either killed or, they kill themselves. It's deadly. And so, we have to work to stop this stuff, right? It's just absolutely imperative. Um, then they say early intervention is essential. Absolutely. Center for Domestic Peace.org. That's a good article. So this other article here, if a child reveals abuse, they say on nspcc.org.uk, if a child talks to you about domestic abuse, it's important to listen carefully to what they're saying. Let them know that they've done the right thing by telling you. Tell them it's not their fault. Say you'll take them seriously. Don't confront the alleged abusers or abuser, whoever it is. Explain what you're going to do next and report what the child has told you as soon as possible. We're going to do a show on how to report, abuse properly, but you can get that information just by going to these links because it's there. And the link's on the show page. Just click on that, follow through, and it'll tell you exactly how to report abuse because you have to do it right. Because if you don't do it right, the case will slip through the courts. It'll just be canceled out, and then the child ends up back with the abusers and can be killed, right? So you have to know how to report it properly. I've seen a lot of material on this, and I've seen videos and heard professionals and stuff like that, and um, you know, people who work with families and children who will talk about that, and it's very, very important. So get the information and learn how to do it properly, right? Yeah, domestic abuse and violence. It's just crazy. I didn't even do the stats, you know. Like I'll probably do a show on the stats. What are the stats for all the different types of abuse? And it's like, you know, it's incredible how many people, like I said, every shelter in Calgary, where I live in my city, is full 365 days a year. That's crazy. Like, that's absolutely insane. I knew friends who had domestic violence situations as well. Some of my friends were involved in domestic violence. They grew up in domestic violence. Their parents probably grew up in domestic violence. The cycle just keeps on rolling. And I mean, serious domestic violence, like guns and people being, you know, put in the hospital, you know, deadly domestic violence. And by the time I was 22, 23, I was like, I just don't want any more of this, man. I had enough of this in my own home. Now I got my friends involved, and my friends are doing this stuff, and I'm being beaten up by their boyfriends, you know. And my life's being threatened by their boyfriends. And it's not because I'm trying to help them, because they're being abused by them. As you know, always somebody who steps in gets hurt. That's what happened between me and my me trying to protect my mom. You know, like, you know, I mean, I was just a little kid, and my dad. Well, I did hit him in the head with a bat. I wrote about it in my book. It was my pink plastic bat. But anyway, I was 9 years old, and I remember this to this day. Of course I do. Um, and my mom, I thought he was trying to kill her, so I went in behind him and smacked him in the head with this bat. And you know, of course, he was angry, 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 angry. Of course, that I would do this. So instead of realizing what an absolute jerk he had been for all the whole 9 years of my life, and sitting down and holding me and hugging me and cry with me and say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Instead of that, he slaps me around, you know, shaking me like this, slapping me around, and then picks me up and throws me against the wall. So I can't feel my neck back here anymore. I've got zero feeling back there. It's numb. And it's like blunt force trauma injury, right? My head was smashed into the wall. You know, I've had my head cracked so many times, it's not even funny. So by my parents, so they're trying to kill me. So that's why I say they were trying to kill me. Absolutely, they were. You know, it's not okay. No child should ever have to grow up in that. But I know I made the right decision. You know, I could have just laid there and tried to plug my ears and not listen to my mom screaming. But I thought, no, somebody's got to go and try to help her. You know, and that was the only thing I could think of doing. Because in our house, you know, we didn't call the cops. You know, that's just not what you do, right? In my house, right? Nobody called the cops. My parents were busted on abuse charges. So, of course, they didn't want the police officers involved again and again and again. So, you know, pretty sad. So, you know, oh, hi, Booth. My bestie's here. I'm sorry you're not feeling well. Don't worry about it. You know, you just take care of yourself, get rest. You know, hope you're feeling all. I hope you feel better tomorrow. And yeah, it's no good. It's no good to not be feeling well. But I'm talking about domestic violence, and it's just such a sad situation, you know. And children, you know, they yeah, you can just watch the archive, but it's the same thing. I'm just kind of going over the same sort of stuff that we all, especially me, you, and Lee, have been talking about for years. Oh man, you know, I found some good art. You can check those links out if you want to on the show page, because that's where the information is coming from, and it's really good. So, you know, it's just horrific, and no child should ever have to go through that. You know. And then when I was 16, um, I I stood up for my mom again against my dad, and again was thrown into a wall. So I'm like, you know, this doesn't do much good to stand up against my dad, right? He's much bigger and taller and stronger than I am. So, you know, but at least I tried, and I think it was the right thing to do, because no one should just sit back and allow this kind of stuff to happen. You know what I mean? So I was willing to protect my mom, who was my main abuser, and take beatings for it. You know, so you know, I thought that should get me some brownie points with my mom, but it never did. Um, it's sad that children have to go through this, and many children are killed in domestic violence disputes. They, you know, in the home. especially with familicide. The parents, one of the parents decides to kill the whole family and then kill themselves, and it does happen. And I grew up in a home that was familicide was threatened all the time. My dad was always threatening to kill all of us and then kill himself. That's a scary way to grow up. That's a scary thing for children to have to be dealing with. But he didn't kill us. He's made our life hell and misery. But the thing is we're still here, and I'm still here. Of course, everybody else is almost dead. They're all gone now. But there's all these little children out here who are not going to make it because somebody's going to decide that they need to destroy the whole family and then kill the children, their partner, and then kill themselves. And all because of some sort of ridiculous domestic violence dispute going on. Yeah, it's horrible. And I mean, I survived. And I mean, I know kids, like I said, I mean, I'm not diminishing the abuse that I went through. I'm all very, very open about what we went through. Um, but I mean, there's so many kids who go through so much worse, and it just breaks my heart. You know what I mean? I mean, the stuff that we went through was bad, but there's worse stuff going on out there. Um, it's just so tragic, and we have to keep talking to be these people, these little children's voice. Um, well, that's awesome. Thank you, Donna. I appreciate it. Well, I just decided to be brave and start talking, and it saved my life, I'm sure, because that was the whole purpose of writing that blog that turned into the book Life of Death Redemption. And you guys came along and really encouraged me to let my voice and my all of my wounded children's voices be heard. And I really wanted to do it for my brothers, especially who suffered a lot of abuse. Just trying to do the right thing and help my mom. And their lives were just such a mess. Um, and my mom never really cared about any of us, so they did it just like me for no reason. It's like it wasn't going to be reciprocated. Just tragic, right? And so I know there's so many people out here who experience this stuff and worse. And I mean, I know lots of survivors' stories and what they've been through. And I mean, the stuff that children have been put through because the parents are too busy fighting and too busy hurting each other and too busy hurting the family to get any help. You know, like my parents, they were told to get counseling. I think they went to 2 sessions. My sister said they went to 2 sessions. That's it. They were supposed to do, you know, major counseling with the family counseling, the whole works. They didn't want to get help. They just wanted to continue living the life they were living, which was horrible. And it's like, you know, I just encourage people, do the right thing. If you're abusing your children, you stop it right now. And you get your child some help. And you get yourself some help. If you know a child who's being abused, you do the right thing, you make a phone call because those children are counting on somebody to do the right thing. You know what I mean? Because they can't do it. You know? And I'm talking little tiny babies and little toddlers that don't know how to use the phone. You know what I mean? So many school age kids now do know how to use the phone. Um, but I'm talking these little babies and little toddlers that they don't have ways to get help. They just have to take what's coming, and that's why we see all these headlines rolling out of babies and little toddlers and stuff ending up in body bags in the morgue, right? Because there's no help for them. They just die on the bedroom floor or wherever they're being abused. This is absolutely not okay. And so Donna Shear, myself, and Lee Roberts, and a whole bunch of other people have been speaking out about this and against this for years. Yeah, that one call may save a child's life. Children are innocent and they can't protect themselves. That's right, Donna. And uh, you know, you can only do what you can do. There's all the people that came before, all the advocates that are on the earth right now today. They did their part. They paved the way. We're trying to just add our voices in there. Get like Donna's doing a petition with Lee Roberts and AU4H, Advocates United for Humanity. And I talked about that on my last show, but we're going to actually do a show on that. Yeah, we'll speak out against violence. It's just not okay. And so we have to if we're going to see change. That's why I decided, okay, I'm going to start talking about this because I knew that, by sitting back, not saying anything, that's not contributing. That's not contributing to change. It's just being like, oh, well, it happened to me. I survived it. It was horrible. I guess I'll just get help and I just won't get involved. I'm like, no, we need to be involved. Everybody needs to be involved in this. So I just want to encourage people, support groups in your local area that work to stop and prevent child abuse. You can support AU4H, who does actually helps a lot of different areas of the United States, and has chapters and stuff like that. You can support them. Find a group that you like to support and support it, and get busy and help save children's lives. There isn't anything better on the planet that we could be doing, because if we don't, who's going to? Not the abusers. The abusers are not going to save those children's lives. They're going to take those children's lives. So that's what I'm saying. Learn the signs and symptoms. Learn how to protect your own children. First of all, that's the most important thing you can do. And then look out for the children around them, their playmates. You know what I mean? Their friends, right? And we could stop a lot of abuse that way, right? Making sure that children in our own worlds are not being abused. So important. So yeah, thanks for being here, everybody. I appreciate everybody who's tuning into these shows. This is day 8, and tomorrow I'll just create the show page in the morning. So for tomorrow night's show, same time, 8 o'clock p.m. Mountain Standard Time, I'll be back on. I can't remember what we're talking about. I've got it written down there. I remembered this morning, but now tonight I can't remember. Um, so yeah, we'll pick up another topic and we'll just continue on. I'm doing 30 days just to be a voice for those children, whose voices were silenced, and a voice for those children, who, whose voices will be silenced. We can't reach the children for tonight. They're going to die. And that's the sad part, right? And but we can certainly try for the children of tomorrow and the children of the future. The children are our future, and we certainly need to be doing a better job. Yeah, we'll see you tomorrow night. I hope you're feeling better, Boo. It's no fun to be sick. And so I'm sending virtual hugs. Hugs. Hope you get better soon, feel better soon. And everybody else have a great night. We'll pick back up tomorrow night, same time, same place. Take care, everybody.